In this video, we are taking these Barell Springs with the rear-wheel drive RC drift car to the track to see just how good are these things. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Troy and this is RoadsideRC. You'll tend to find me bashing or crawling or drifting or racing, plus doing product review videos and how-tos. And I recently had a video here in my garage where I actually took these Barell Springs and I tested them to see what kind of movement they gave, how was the droop, how did the suspension feel just on the workbench and in the garage with these very stiff Barell Springs, and it really kind of confused me. It didn't make any sense to me as to why anybody would run these, but I got a lot of feedback on that video about people who really liked the direct feel of a stiffer spring and said, you know, Troy, you got to really take it to the track to test it. So that's exactly what we're doing in this video. I took the car to the track and I ran multiple laps back to back to back with what I'm going to call like my typical setup, which is a very soft and long spring. It's something that allows the car to really set down into this shock suspension and gives it ability to go both up and down in the shock travel, and then swapped in these Barell Springs in different combinations because I have two of the V1s and I have two of the V2s, and so instead of having a set of all four, what we did is just try them piece by piece to see what kind of a difference would it make. Could I tell a difference both quantitatively? Could we see a speed difference around the track? Does it actually have a faster lap time? But then also kind of qualitatively from my feel, does it feel sharper? Does it feel like it turns in better? Is there that difference? And here's what we saw. So the first thing up is time. So just lap time. So here an example, car driving around the track, just making a lap. It's a very thin day at the track. Not a lot of people out there, not a lot of places, not a lot of folks to get in the way. All I had to do was make repeatable laps. And what we saw was with my soft spring set, 23:04. So just a little bit over 23 seconds. Jumping to the V1 to V2 Springs, 22:55. Now let me be clear, this is seconds frames. So that is out of 60 frames in a second. That is the difference of 0.15 of a second. So like, it's better, it's faster. It's not a lot. It's barely, it's a very, very small amount. Then I swapped them. I put the stiffer V2s in the front, V1s in the rear. Just a little bit faster again, 22 seconds and 40 frames. So now we are a quarter of a second faster. And then I went to the V1s in the front and my typical like softer spring in the rear, 22:18. Another 0.36 of a second faster. From where we started, 23 seconds, 4 frames, we got all the way down to 22 seconds, 18 frames. That's 3/4 of a second, 0.76. That's 3/4 of a second faster as we progressed throughout the day and as we continue to toy with this. How significant is that? So I was curious, can I tell that, did it just have like one or a couple lucky laps, but then otherwise was like how repeatable was I with my driving? So I did just a standard deviation. So my math people out there that know statistics and all that, shout out, you can explain down in the comments better than I can what the standard deviation is. But standard deviation of the soft, 0.013, of the V1 V2 setup, 0.015, basically the same. V2 V1, 0.16, basically the same. Swapping my softs onto the rear V1s on the front, 0.009. So like that ending up super soft rear suspension combination with a stiffer front combination ended up being the fastest around the track and the most repeatable, which is interesting. Now, I've had a lot of folks say this before, and I didn't ever quite really 100% believe it. They said, hey, you gotta do that really soft spring in the rear, but in the front, maybe you want a stiffer spring. Even the RevD spring boxes that you can buy, they have a pretty dang stiff front spring. And when I've talked about that before, some folks were like, you might want to try it. Maybe there really is something to that stiffer front with a softer rear. Maybe this is legitimate. Maybe I need to do some more testing with those RevD springs because they're like a progressive front spring. What I mean by that is instead of having just a constant spacing and wire diameter like this, which is a constant spring, you can get something like this. The spacing between the coils actually changes. You can have a more of a soft like initial reaction, but then stiffer later. And RevD has a couple different springs like that of different lengths and everything that you can try. That might be a comparable and maybe more sophisticated version than what we're getting here with these Barell Springs. Now, there can be more to a lap around a track and kind of repeatability lap after lap if you're not really pushing it very hard. And so there's a lot of different variation that can come into a single lap time. So one of the things I did is I grabbed 4 screenshots, this marker, this line on the track versus the angle of my car. So this is each one of the different spring setups. And you can kind of see how deep I was in the zone. Was I matching the angle? Now, I'll be honest, I wasn't trying super hard. I was just kind of just feeling with the car and seeing how it was going. But just naturally, without really pushing it, what you can see is that the V2s on the front, the very, very stiff springs in the front with the V1s in the rear was the worst, along with, though, unfortunately, my fastest set that was the most reliable. So the V1s on the front and then my soft springs in the rear. So is that part of the reason why I was faster? Is I was a little bit shallower in that zone? Very interesting. So when we put all of this together, I kind of come away with, I think, 2 conclusions. First is that if you look at my variation over the day, plus my variation lap to lap within one test run group was larger than any average variation spring to spring to spring. So what does that tell me? That tells me there's a lot more variation out there and there's a lot more speed out there than just from the spring. Okay, and I'm going to give a shout out to Mr. Daler, who is from our local track. He's someone who definitely pays attention and does a lot of really in-depth research on the suspension and the cars that we drive with RC Drift. And one of the things that he said was he wasn't nearly as concerned about the spring as he was about the quality of the shock that spring is around. And I kind of wonder if that's what we're seeing here, is that there's probably a fairly wide range of spring rates and designs that will give you acceptable results. But maybe the shock that those are in is actually much more important and drives a bigger change than the spring itself. The second conclusion is around this whole, do you set your car up with a very soft suspension, long travel soft spring versus a shorter hard spring? It comes down a little bit more to your feel and your comfort and your repeatability as a driver. Think back to those angle pictures that I just showed you here recently. When you think about like a competition, what are you really judging them on? You're judging them on like depth of the zone, angle matching, and you're looking at really the repeatability of being able to jump the car on the track and being able to do it with a moment's notice with someone right on your door. So does that mean that the up to 3/4 of a second a lap that we found by changing these different springs, is that actually less important than the driver being super comfortable and super confident in exactly what their car is going to do? I think not. I think that confidence and that repeatability is actually much more important. And so then if that's the case for something like a comp kind of situation, hard being the best answer or soft being the best answer, I think might not. Neither one is the right answer. It's always the right answer for you. What makes you most comfortable with your car and on your track? Simple example, some tracks very smooth polished, so maybe those stiffer springs, you kind of get away with it. Whereas some tracks a lot bumpier, a lot more maybe natural scale feeling, maybe you need that, that softer spring in order to be able to absorb those imperfections. All of that comes down to say, I think you got to do your own testing and you got to figure out what works for you. I will have a link down here to Dark Denim, Dark Drift RC, where you can get these Barell Springs. I will also have a link in the video description to those Rev D springs, some MST springs that I like. And I think really at the end of the day, if you're investing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars into your RC Drift car, it's probably a really good idea for you to get multiple sets of springs and be able to test for yourself with your vehicle, your driving style, your track, as to what's really the best. If you have any questions about the testing that I did or any comments or ideas, leave them down in the video comments section. Like I said, those parts are going to be in the video description, hyperlinked there. And if you're curious about any other testing I've done, drift tech stuff like that, there'll be a playlist popping up over here on your right, and I hope to see you in one of those videos. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.